Hello, class. Today we're going to be going over chapter 14, which is the lymphatic system, and we're going to talk about immunity or immune system. So, we are going to describe the generalized functions of the lymphatic system and list the primary lymphatic structures. Discuss the immune system and compare nonspecific and specific immunity, natural and artificial immunity, and active and passive immunity. We will discuss the major types of immune system molecules and indicate how antibodies and complement proteins function. And we'll discuss the development and functions of B and T cells and compare and contrast humoral and cell-mediated immunity. So, the organization of the lymphatic system, it begins with lymph. Lymph is this fluid. And it is basically the excessive fluid left behind by capillary exchange that drains from tissue spaces along with some proteins, lipids, which are fats, and some other substances. Lymph is then transported by way of lymphatic vessels to the bloodstream, thereby returning some of the fluids lost by the blood as it travels through the tissues. The lymphatic system is an important partner of the cardiovascular system, both components of the circulatory system. In addition to lymph and lymphatic vessels, the lymphatic system includes lymph nodes and lymph organs, such as the lymph nodes, the thymus, the tonsils, and the spleen. So as you can see here, the little pea-sized things or the different lymph nodes, they're all throughout our body. And then you can see here where the thoracic duct is wrapped around the different cardiovascular. You can see in the right internal jugular vein and the left internal jugular vein. And then at the bottom, you're going to see this image again. In the blue is what is drained by the right lymphatic duct, which is not much, right? Not much. Most is drained by the thoracic duct. So, lymph. Let's talk about this again. This is the fluid from blood capillaries along with substances from the tissue cells that become part of, very important here, the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. The fluid in the tissue spaces that carries protein molecules and other substances back to the blood. And the lymphatic capillaries are tiny blind-ended tubes distributed in tissue spaces. The lymph flows through the capillaries into larger and larger vessels called lymphatic venules and lymphatic veins. Lymphatic vessels permit only one-way movement of lymph. It can't go back. It only goes one way. It is microscopic in size. And the lymphatic vessels consist of single cell layer of simple squamous epithelium. And there is a pore fit between adjacent cells that results in these porous walls. Now, the lymphatic vessels. So we have the right lymphatic duct. Remember, this is the blue area on this image. It drains lymph from the right upper extremity and right side of the head, neck, and upper torso. The thoracic duct is the largest lymphatic vessel and has enlarged pouch along its course called the cisterna chyli, and it drains lymph from about 3/4 of the body. So 3/4 of the body gets drained because of the thoracic duct. This gives you an idea of the role of the lymphatic system in fluid homeostasis, because there's a lot of fluid exchange that's going on. You can see that interstitial fluid that I talked about, lymph and the lymph flow. Again, I don't expect you to memorize this image. It just gives you an idea of how this is all working together. So basically, you're going to see the lymph flowing through the lymphatic capillaries. Next, it moves into successively larger and larger vessels, sometimes called lymphatic venules and lymphatic veins. So now let's move on to lymph nodes. So lymph travels from its origin towards the thoracic or the right lymphatic ducts and then to the venous blood. It is filtered by passing through lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are located in clusters along the pathway of lymphatic vessels. And lymphoid tissue is a mass of lymphocytes and related cells inside a lymphoid organ. It provides immune function and development of immune cells. Lymph nodes and other lymphoid organs have functions that include defense and white blood cell formation. There's something called biological filtration that takes place. This is the flow of lymph to a lymph node via several afferent lymphatic vessels and drained from a node by a single efferent lymph vessel. In passing through the node, lymph is filtered so that bacteria, cancer cells, and damaged tissue cells are removed and prevented from entering the blood and circulating all over the body. The breast has a uniquely extensive network of lymphatic drainage. This helps to drain excess fluid that can accumulate when they are producing milk, but it can also serve as a pathway for the spread of infection and cancer. So lymph node function, this right here shows lymph node function by depicting a section of skin in which infection surrounds a hair follicle. So you can see where the pus is, this big yellow stuff around the hair follicle. There's bacteria, and you can see where there's a little lymph vessel that kind of pulls in the bacteria into the lymph node where there's immune cells to try to fight it off and get it moved out of the body and not in the blood. This shows the lymphatic drainage of the breast, which is important to understand this mainly because breast cancer can spread to lymph nodes very quickly. And the reason why is you can see that there's a crazy amount of these little pea-sized lymph nodes all throughout, right above the breast, going up into the arm, even up into the peristernal node. So, there's just a lot of lymphatic drainage in the breast tissue. Now I want to talk about the thymus. The thymus is a small lymphoid tissue organ located mostly in the mediastinum. The total weight is 35 to 40 grams, which is a little more than an ounce. It plays a vital role and a central role in immunity. And remember, thymus think T cells. Thymus produces T lymphocytes or T cells. These T cells leave the thymus and circulate to the spleen, tonsils, lymph nodes, and other lymph tissues. Remember, T cells are the frontline fighters. They secrete hormones from the thymus called thymosins, which influence the T cell development. Thymus tissue gradually gets replaced by fat and connective tissue during childhood in a process called involution. And this is important to remember because our immune function kind of starts to decrease as we get older and older and older because our thymus is basically replaced by fat and connective tissue throughout our life. Now, tonsils. These are composed of 3 masses of lymphoid tissue around the openings of the mouth and throat, and you need to know these 3. So the palatine tonsils are what we call the tonsils. They lie on each side of the throat. And when someone opens up and goes, ah, you can see them on either side. Then you have the pharyngeal tonsils known as the adenoids. They're in a little closer. And if the adenoids swell too much along with the tonsils, this can block off our airway, especially if the lingual tonsils, which are near the base of the tongue, start to swell up too. Now, the important thing about tonsils is they serve as a first-line defense from the exterior that comes in through our nose and our mouth. They are subject to chronic infection, and enlargement of the pharyngeal tonsils can impair breathing. So this shows the location. You can see the palate. The gums have been cut away, and you can see the pharyngeal tonsil, palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils, the root of the tongue. Now let's move on to the spleen. The spleen is the largest lymphoid organ in the body. It is located in the upper left quadrant of the abdomen, lateral to the stomach. It is often injured by trauma to the abdomen, and the spleen likes to bleed. Now, the surgical removal of the spleen is called a splenectomy. The spleen functions include phagocytosis, or cell eating of bacteria and old red blood cells. It also acts as a blood reservoir. Matter of fact, the spleen may contain more than 500 milliliters, about 1 pint of blood. Because it destroys worn out red blood cells, which fall apart while traveling through the mesh of the spleen, it salvages iron from the hemoglobin for future use. We can survive without a spleen, but they are not removed unless absolutely necessary. Now let's go into our immune system. Functions of the immune system include protection of the body from pathological bacteria, which are microorganisms, foreign tissue cells, and cancerous cells. It's made up of defensive cells and molecules. So nonspecific immunity is known as generalized immunity, often called innate immunity. So nonspecific immunity is generalized, also known as innate immunity, because it does not require prior exposure to an antigen. We are born with nonspecific, innate, or generalized immune defenses. It is non-specific, rapid acting, utilizes complement proteins, interferons, and others, and it includes phagocytes like neutrophils, macrophages, and natural killer cells. The nonspecific immunity or innate immune system, innate immunity, generalized immunity, whatever you want to call it, it all means the same thing. It is responsible for the inflammatory response that our body does. It attracts immune cells to the site of an injury, increases local blood flow, which causes heat and redness to the area. It then increases vascular permeability, which results in swelling and pain, and it promotes the movement of white blood cells to the site of injury or infection. So this is the inflammatory response. It happens to any injury. There's going to be inflammation. And when we say inflammation, this is what's occurring in that area. And it's because of our nonspecific or innate immunity. So again, this shows the inflammatory response, which I have already broken down for you. Now let's go into more specific immunity. So specific immunity is often called adaptive immunity because of the ability to recognize, respond, and remember harmful substances or bacteria. Adaptive immunity is specific or acquired. It reacts slower than innate, because innate or generalized is immediate, okay? So adaptive immunity is specific or acquired, and it is slower. It has some memory cells involved. It involves antibodies and various signaling chemicals and utilizes lymphocytes such as B and T cells. Now, natural immunity occurs because of exposure to a causative agent is not deliberate. In other words, an active disease. So you get a disease, your body becomes immune to it, forms antibodies to it. This is an active part of our natural immune system. Now, passive natural immunity is immunity that passes from the mother to the fetus through the placenta or from the mother to the child through the mother's breast milk. Artificial immunity is exposure to a causative agent that is deliberate. We have active artificial immunity, and this is vaccination that results in activation of immune system. This is deliberate exposure to a vaccine. So artificial active, think vaccine. Now, artificial passive is protective material developed in another individual's immune system and given to a previously non-immune individual. So passive artificial immunity would be if someone was exposed to hepatitis, a person will be given a gamma globulin shot, which is a fancy word for an antibody to hepatitis that came from somewhere else. Now, there are molecules that are critical in immune system functioning that include cytokines, antibodies, and complement proteins. So cytokines are chemicals released from cells to act as direct agents of innate, non-specific immunity. Now, antibodies are protein compounds with specific combining sites. Combining sites attach antibodies to specific antigens. Antigens are foreign proteins. They form an antigen-antibody complex called humoral immunity or antibody-mediated immunity. Antigen-antibody complexes may neutralize toxins, they may clump or agglutinate enemy cells, or they could promote phagocytosis where they get eaten by macrophages and neutrophils. This is a fancy picture of what I've already said. If you need to look at it to break it down from what I've talked about. Now, complement proteins. These are a group of protein enzymes normally present in an inactive state in the blood. They may be activated by triggers, including the exposure of complement binding sites on antibodies when they attach to antigens. The process is a rapid-fire cascade called complement cascade. This is an important mechanism of action for antibodies. It causes cell lysis, or it just makes the cells rupture, basically, by permitting entry of water through a defect created in the plasma membrane. The result of the complement cascade is that the donut-shaped protein rings are formed and literally bore holes in the foreign cells and cause these things to explode. They're crazy. So you can see here the complement proteins go in, and then water and sodium go in, and then it just, boom, ruptures. Or lysis, cell lysis. Now, they serve other roles in the immune system, such as attracting immune cells to the site of infection, activating immune cells, marking foreign cells for destruction, and increasing permeability of blood vessels. They play a vital role in producing the inflammatory response. Now let's talk a little bit more about phagocytes. Phagocytes are these cells that ingest and destroy foreign cells or other harmful substances via phagocytosis or cell eating. Neutrophils are short-lived phagocytic cells. Monocytes are the big Pac-Man cells. They develop into phagocytic macrophages. Macro means big, and migrate to the tissues. We got dendritic cells, often found at or near external surfaces. And then the macrophages and the dendritic cells act as an antigen-presenting cells by displaying ingested antigens on their outer surface to trigger specific immune cells. They basically wander around in an alert after they start eating everything and engulf whatever they find. Here's the phagocytosis of bacteria. So bacteria is there, gets in, attachment to nonspecific receptors, phagocytosis starts to occur, enzymes get released, and then the cycle just keeps repeating. Lymphocytes. These are the most numerous of the immune system cells. Lymphocytes consist of natural killer cells, NK cells, B cells, and T cells. The development of B cells. So primitive stem cells migrate from the bone marrow and go through 2 stages of development. The first stage, stem cells develop into immature B cells. This takes place in the liver and bone marrow before birth, and in the bone marrow only in adults. B cells are small lymphocytes with antibody molecules, which they have synthesized in their plasma membranes. After they mature, inactive B cells migrate chiefly to lymph nodes. They are still inactive and each carries a different antibody. So this gives you an idea of what I just said, right? Now, the second stage of the development of B cells. So this is where the inactive B cells develop into activated B cells. This is initiated by inactive B cells' contact with antigens, foreign proteins, which bind to its surface antibodies plus cytokines, which are the chemical signals from T cells. Activated B cell, by divided repeatedly, forms 2 clones of the cells, plasma, which is effector, and then memory cells. Plasma cells secrete antibodies into the blood. So B cells, antibodies, and memory cells are stored in the lymph node to remember that particular antigen or that particular bacteria or virus again in the future. If subsequent exposure to the antigen, that activated B cell, occurs, memory cells become plasma cells and secrete antibodies because they recognize them. Memory B cells create long-term immunity. If we did not have B cells, we would not have memory cells, and we would not have long-term immunity. Now, the function of B cells. Indirectly, B cells produce humoral immunity. Activated B cells develop into plasma cells. Plasma cells secrete antibodies in the blood, and circulating antibodies produce humoral immunity. Now let's talk about the development of T cells. So stem cells from bone marrow migrate to the thymus gland. Remember, thymus, think T cells. The first stage, stem cells develop into T cells. This occurs in the thymus during the few months before and after birth. T cells migrate chiefly to lymph nodes. Now the second stage, T cells develop into activated T cells. This occurs when and if antigen binds to T cell surface proteins and a chemical signal is received from another T cell. And you can see this here. Now you can see where once it gets to activated T cells, we've got memory cells, which are going to be the B cells. The T cells are part of the effector cells. And they kill infected cells and tumor cells. They trigger B and T cell activation. They regulate a lot of immune functions. So function of T cells, basically they produce cell-mediated immunity. So B cells, humoral immunity. T cells are cell-mediated immunity. This happens because of cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, and regulatory T cells. Cytotoxic T cells kill infected or tumor cells by releasing a substance that poisons infected or tumor cells. It kills infected and tumor cells directly. Cytotoxic, poison T cells. Helper T cells release chemicals that attract and activate macrophages to kill cells by phagocytosis, and they produce chemicals that help activate our B cells. Regulatory T cells release chemicals to suppress the immune responses. So you can see here, activated T cells, we've got cytotoxic with poisons things. Helper T cells release compounds that help attract other things to it. Regulatory T cells kind of suppress the immune response and decrease the inflammatory response so it doesn't just get worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, natural killer cells. These are a group of lymphocytes that kill many types of tumor cells and cells that are infected by different types of viruses. So natural killer cells, think killers of tumor cells and viruses. They use several different killing methods, most of which chemically trigger programmed cell death, and this is called apoptosis in the target cell. And that, my friends, is the end of the lymphatic system and immunity. Again, keep studying, pause, take notes, and repetition is key. I will talk to you in the next one.